Have you ever wondered what happens when humanity faces off against some of the most dangerous mercenaries in the galaxy? What happens when Earth's finest warriors, with no advanced technology, are pitted against genetically enhanced killers and ruthless alien forces? Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story, where we dive into the most thrilling adventures and uncover how humans the Deathworlders prove that their true strength lies not just in weapons, but in their ability to adapt, outthink, and outlast even the deadliest of enemies. Today's video will take you deep into the heart of the galaxy's most intense conflict, where Echo Squad, Earth's elite special forces, must face off against mercenaries sent by the Helix Consortium. They are tasked with uncovering illegal operations, but as they venture deeper, they find themselves up against something much darker, the Precursor technology, a forbidden artifact that could alter the balance of power across the galaxy. Let's jump right in, as Echo Squad faces Keldar and his ruthless mercenaries. What will happen when Earth's warriors meet an enemy they never expected? The footage played again, the familiar thermal signature of Keldar's warriors flashing across the screen. Each one was a marvel of bioengineering larger than most species, their muscles rippling with strength and their reflexes faster than any natural predator. But now, in the midst of the dense jungle of Nova 7, the warriors were falling, one by one, their heat signatures disappearing in a cruel game of cat and mouse. Keldar's claws tapped harder against the cold, unfeeling metal of the table, the sound echoing through the dimly lit command center. His gaze remained fixed on the screen, but his mind was far from focused. Each failed mission, each loss stung like a wound to his pride, but this was something else. Something far more dangerous. Zarian shifted uneasily beside him, his eyes flickering toward the playback but quickly averting his gaze from his commander. The tension between them thickened, palpable in the cold room. "Commander, we've already watched this video 5 times, Zarian muttered, his voice laced with a hint of concern. "What more is there to see?" "I know what I saw," Keldar snapped, his voice low but edged with frustration. His fists clenched, and the muscles in his jaw tightened. "Play it again," he ordered, his voice rising with authority. The screen flickered and the video replayed once more. The Zaldhar warriors advanced cautiously through the dense, alien jungle. Their steps were quiet, calculated, each footfall muffled by the thick undergrowth. Their predator instincts were finely tuned, honed over generations of war. But in the dim green glow of the jungle, there was no warning of the deadly presence that lurked nearby. As the thermal signatures of his warriors moved deeper into the jungle, one by one, they blinked out of existence. No sudden flashes of heat, no scream of pain, just cold, empty voids where his soldiers had been. The air felt thick, oppressive, as if the jungle itself was closing in on the mercenaries. Then, a single heat signature appeared on the screen, faint, but distinct. A human figure. It moved with uncanny speed, the small body darting through the jungle, its movements almost too fast to register. The human, though smaller than Keldar's soldiers, was swift, agile, a blur of motion that made it difficult to track. Keldar's breath caught in his throat. His hand gripped the edge of the table, his claws sinking into the cold metal as the image froze on the screen. The human soldier stood over one of Keldar's most elite warriors, who was now helpless in the human's grip. The blade was at the warrior's throat, held with a precision that seemed impossible. It was too simple. Too easy. Keldar's mind raced, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make sense of the impossible scene unfolding before him. He had trained his warriors for years, had seen them defeat entire fleets and armies. How could a creature so small, so fragile, do this? Zarian's voice was barely a whisper, filled with dread. "They come from Earth, Commander. A death world." The words hit Keldar like a physical blow, each syllable an unsettling reality. He had heard of death worlds, planets so hostile that only the strongest could survive. But Earth was barely out of its solar system, still in its infancy compared to the galaxy's ancient races. Yet here they were, this tiny, unassuming species, capable of turning the most feared warriors into prey. Keldar's heart pounded in his chest, and for the first time in his long career, a sense of unease crawled up his spine. Fear. It was a foreign sensation. He, a battle-hardened Zaldhar mercenary, had never feared anyone or anything. But these humans, this was different. How did creatures so small kill our best warriors? Keldar muttered to himself, his voice barely audible, the words heavy with disbelief. Zarian remained silent for a moment, his eyes flicking to the screen. They're different, Commander. They don't fight like other species. They don't rely on the strength of their bodies, their claws or weapons. They fight with something else, something we don't understand. Keldar's claws curled into fists, the metal table creaking under the pressure. He stood, his muscles rippling under his armor as he moved to the holographic display. The cold, distant light from the projector illuminated his face, casting deep shadows over his features. "Prepare the forces," Keldar said, his voice low and filled with a simmering fury. "I don't care how deadly they are. We will take them down. We will show these humans what happens when they challenge the might of the Zaldhar." Zarian nodded but hesitated. "And the rest of the death worlds they've conquered? The ones they've protected?" he asked, a glint of fear in his voice. Keldar turned sharply, his yellow eyes flashing with unrelenting determination. "We'll deal with them later," he growled. "First, we make Earth pay for what they've done. We crush them, and then we make an example of them." As Keldar stormed out of the command center, his mind swirled with rage. He had underestimated humanity. He had believed they were like any other species, a species that could be destroyed with firepower and strategy. But the humans had shown him something he couldn't ignore: they were adaptable. They were survivors. And Keldar was going to learn, the hard way, what happens when you underestimate Earth. Keldar's yellow eyes glowed with the faintest trace of fury as he leaned forward, his claws digging into the cold metal of the table. The soft hum of the dimly lit command center buzzed in his ears, but his focus was entirely on the figure before him, Mr. Grey, the enigmatic representative of the Helix Consortium. Mr. Grey's form was tall and slender, draped in sleek, dark robes that shimmered with a faint metallic hue under the overhead lights. His skin was pale, so pale it seemed almost translucent, and his facial features, though human in shape, were unnervingly smooth, almost too perfect, as if they had been artificially crafted. His identity was a mystery, a fact that irked Keldar to no end. The Consortium kept its true origins hidden from the galaxy, a trait Keldar found both suspicious and dangerous. "Commander Keldar," Mr. Grey's voice was flat, mechanical, as if it had been conditioned through artificial means to carry no emotion. "I trust you've seen the footage from Nova 7. The question hung in the air like a thick fog. Keldar's fists tightened, and his sharp teeth ground together in anger. "My warriors were the best," Keldar growled. "These humans, whatever they are more dangerous than you told us." Keldar's gaze flickered to the hologram in front of him. The room around them was filled with the faint glow of holoscreens and projection devices, casting sharp shadows on the walls. Nova 7 was displayed once more, showing a dark, overgrown jungle teeming with life. The last image froze a human soldier standing alone, surrounded by the fallen bodies of Keldar's elite warriors. Despite their imposing stature, the Zaldhar warriors had been helpless against the speed, efficiency, and brutality of the human attack. Keldar slammed his claws onto the table, making the surface ripple with the force. His heart pounded against his chest, the frustration and fear seeping through his controlled exterior. Humans, how had they done it? How had creatures so fragile been able to strike fear into the hearts of mercenaries and warriors like him? Without a word, Mr. Grey placed a small, sleek device on the table. It hummed to life, and with a soft flicker, it projected a series of holograms into the air. Several planets, each marked with specific coordinates, glowed in front of them. Each one was critical strategically placed worlds the Helix Consortium had been mining for years. Keldar's eyes narrowed as he studied the images. The Consortium's wealth relied on these planets, their resources abundant in rare minerals essential for various technologies across the galaxy. But something was wrong. The symbols marking the planets were new. The human protection treaties had claimed these worlds, much to the Consortium's displeasure. "We are losing profits every day," Mr. Gray continued, his tone still emotionless. "These planets have now been claimed by the humans, all under their protection treaties. If we don't act soon, we'll lose everything." Keldar's fur bristled as the weight of the situation settled on his shoulders. The humans, they weren't just a nuisance. They were a threat to everything. He needed to end this before it spiraled out of control. He glanced at Mr. Gray, his voice laced with controlled rage. "How much are you offering?" "Triple your usual payment," Mr. Gray replied smoothly, without hesitation. "We will also provide new weapons technology, advanced tools that will give you the upper hand against them. You will be able to defeat their best warriors." Keldar's sharp ears twitched forward, his interest piqued. The offer was far more than he had anticipated, and yet, doubt crept into his mind. What was the catch? He narrowed his eyes, staring at the frozen image of the human soldier on the screen. There was something unsettling about the way the human moved, the way the soldier had dispatched his warriors with such precision, as if they had been anticipating Keldar's every move. It didn't sit right with him. "I want all the information you have on human special forces," Keldar demanded, his voice cold and commanding. "Every detail. I need to understand what makes them so dangerous." Mr. Gray didn't flinch. His expression remained unwavering as he replied, "We need these creatures eliminated, permanently." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloak. Keldar leaned back in his chair, his claws running over the smooth surface of the table. Permanently. The human threat had to be extinguished, but there was something more beneath this mission, something that didn't sit right. Keldar had faced enemies before, beasts, other mercenaries, entire armies. But these humans were different. They didn't fight like others. They didn't fight to kill, they fought to survive. And that made them more dangerous than anything Keldar had ever faced. "Prepare my forces," Keldar said, his voice quiet but deadly. "We'll deal with them. But this time, we'll have more than just firepower. We'll outthink them. We'll break their spirit." Zarian, standing at Keldar's side, looked at him cautiously, his voice hesitant. "But Commander, what if these humans? What if they're not like the others? They survived Nova 7. Against the best we've got." Keldar's eyes gleamed, the sharp, deadly focus of a predator. "We're not just mercenaries, Zarian. We're Zaldhar. We don't fear the unknown. We destroy it." But inside, doubt gnawed at Keldar's mind. Was he underestimating these humans? Their reputation for survival was growing with every skirmish. Perhaps it was time to understand their weaknesses, their adaptability before it was too late. Keldar stared at the hologram again, this time with renewed determination. This was more than just a mercenary mission. It was a test. The humans had entered their territory, and Keldar knew one thing: survival was no longer enough. The briefing room was cold, the sterile walls of Outpost Sigma on Themis Moon reflecting the harsh, unyielding light of the artificial overheads. The faint hum of the station's power systems filled the background, a constant reminder of the isolation they had chosen for this mission. Lieutenant Jack Hunter wiped the sweat from his brow as he walked in with Echo Squad, his movements deliberate, as if every step had been practiced 1,000 times. The squad, though exhausted from their last mission on Nova 7, stood with the same military precision they had trained for. Their movements were sharp, instinctual. Despite the tension in the air, despite the weight of their past victory, a victory that had wiped out 12 alien mercenaries without a single human casualty. Their eyes were locked in with focus. There was no room for distraction here, not when they were about to face an even greater challenge. Standing at the head of the room was Admiral Gregory West, a tall, broad-shouldered man whose face, while calm, held the weight of experience. His eyes were calculating, always watching, always assessing. The Admiral's reputation was one of stern discipline and unwavering resolve, but he had come to trust Echo Squad more than most. He didn't speak immediately. He didn't need to. His silence was a nod of approval. A simple acknowledgement of their success. But as the squad gathered in front of him, Jack knew better than to rest on their laurels. The world, no, the galaxy was changing. And so was their mission. "Excellent work," Admiral West said, his voice a mix of calm authority and the unspoken weight of responsibility. "But the Helix Consortium is angry. They're bringing in more mercenaries. We need to infiltrate a facility on Glacius and gather evidence of their illegal operations." Jack nodded, his mind already shifting from the mission he had just completed to the one ahead. He had faced worse, but the thought of Helix Consortium, the ones who had been orchestrating the illegal mining operations, brought with it a new kind of unease. The Zaldhar, Vorrik, and Insectarii were formidable, yes, each species possessing an advantage that made them terrifying in their own way. Yet Jack knew that Echo Squad was prepared. They were trained not only to fight but to adapt. The hologram projector at the front of the room flickered to life, displaying several of the alien species the squad would face. The Insectarii, with their multi-limbed bodies and acute senses, could track a target over miles of rugged terrain. The Vorrik, with their thick, armored exoskeletons and brute strength, were built to withstand attacks that would cripple most other species. And, of course, the Zaldhar, a race of mercenaries who had mastered the art of assassination and stealth. The screen flashed images of them, each more terrifying than the last, their features exaggerated in the light of the hologram, as though mocking the very idea that humanity could stand a chance against them. But Jack Hunter didn't flinch. He didn't need to. He knew his team, and more importantly, he knew humanity. He had seen the humans of Earth survive in ways no other species ever could. From fighting the planet's most dangerous predators to surviving its harshest environments, humanity had adapted, thrived, and learned to overcome. Jack glanced at his team, their eyes reflecting the same unspoken understanding. Rodriguez, the team's heavy weapons specialist, stood with his arms crossed over his chest, his massive arms like boulders in contrast to the delicate holographic image before him. Okino, their stealth expert, was standing at ease, his dark eyes scanning the room, always alert. Singh, their tech specialist, was already tapping on a data pad, the soft click of the keys a stark contrast to the looming tension. Petrov, the team's medic, adjusted his medical kit, his mind likely running through the logistics of their next mission. And Kim, their linguist and field strategist, stood at the far side, her eyes sharp, studying the holographic representations of the alien species. The weight of the briefing pressed on them all, but none of them showed fear. They were ready. "We will adapt," Jack said, his voice steady and strong as he looked each of them in the eye. He could feel the fire rising in his chest, the fight that had been ignited since the first day he had walked into this mission. "We're going to show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." His words echoed in the room, and for a moment, everything was still. The silent hum of the room seemed to stop. No one moved, but Jack could see the spark in his team's eyes. The squad didn't just believe in themselves, they believed in Earth. Earth wasn't like any other planet. They didn't have the same genetic advantages as the Vorrik or the Zaldhar. They didn't have the heightened senses of the Insectarii. But what they did have was something more powerful. Adaptability. They could survive in environments where no other species would last. They could change tactics on the fly, exploit weaknesses in their enemies' designs, and use every environment as a weapon. Jack took a breath, feeling the weight of the mission settle on his shoulders. The Glacius facility wasn't just another target, it was a chance to show the galaxy that humanity wasn't just surviving. They were thriving. Admiral West clicked his tongue and gestured to the hologram, shifting it to show the Glacius facility. The planet was a frozen wasteland, a place where only the hardiest of life forms could survive. Glacius was a planet of extremes, temperatures below freezing, winds so strong they could tear the flesh from a body, and gravity heavier than Earth's. No other species would last in these conditions for long, but humanity had learned to thrive in even harsher environments. The Echo Squad was built for this. "You're going in alone," Admiral West continued, his voice cutting through the tension. "Infiltrate, gather the evidence, and get out. We can't risk bringing too much attention to this. There's too much at stake." Jack nodded. They had done this before. No mission was ever easy, but this one would test them in ways they hadn't imagined. They would have to use everything they knew about survival, combat, and each other to get in, get the intel, and get out without being caught. And as they prepared for the mission ahead, Jack felt a rising certainty in his chest. This was humanity's time to show the galaxy that they were no longer the underdogs. They were the apex predators of the stars. The Alpha 9 command center on Glacius was a cavernous, dimly lit space, filled with the soft whirring of machinery and the occasional hum of energy shields flickering to life. The temperature outside the facility was unbearable, plummeting to -60 degrees Celsius, a temperature that would freeze most species in seconds. Yet, inside the command center, the air was heavy with the heat of Keldar's determination. He stood at the center of the room, his yellow eyes narrowing as he studied the holographic map of the mining facility. The walls around him were lined with advanced technology, monitors flickering with data and statistics. A distant rumbling echoed from the planet's surface, a reminder of the violent winds that whipped through Glacius' icy landscapes. But this was a place of control, Keldar's domain. The Zaldhar had outfitted Alpha 9 with the best surveillance and defense systems available, ensuring that no one could slip past without notice. Keldar's claws clicked against the console as he stared at the hologram of the mining facility, its layout displayed in stunning detail. Alpha 9 had once been a vital part of the consortium's operations, but now, it was a trap, a deadly maze designed to ensnare any who dared to challenge the Helix Consortium. "These humans will fall right into our trap," Keldar growled, his voice a low, vibrating sound like stones grinding together. His muscles tensed, and a cruel smile curled on his lips. "We'll show them that no one can outsmart us." Beside him stood Vexler, his second in command, his eyes flicking between the hologram and Keldar's tense figure. Vexler was more cautious, but the confidence of his leader had a magnetic pull. Keldar's arrogance, however, was almost tangible as he continued to plot their fate. "Send in the Insectarii first," Keldar ordered, his voice a firm command. "Their forearms and poison sacs will be perfect for clearing the area. The humans won't see them coming. Once they've drawn the humans in, we'll deploy the Vorrik for the final push." The Insectarii were silent, calculating, their insect-like bodies sleek and sharp. Their compound eyes could detect the faintest movement from 20 meters away, and their natural venom was lethal enough to incapacitate or kill with a single strike. Their speed was unmatched, and in the darkness of Glacius's crumbling facility, they would blend in like shadows, silent death waiting to strike. As the plan unfolded, Keldar's mind worked like a finely tuned machine, calculating every move and counter-move. He knew these humans were unpredictable, but he also understood that overconfidence could be their downfall. He would make them believe they were in control, only to trap them within the facility's walls, where they would be overwhelmed. Far from the cold command center, across the frozen surface of Glacius, Echo Squad was preparing for the mission. Inside their cramped quarters on Outpost Sigma, the team adjusted their gear. The humans did not rely on genetic enhancements or cybernetic upgrades like their enemies. Instead, they had something more deadly: adaptability. Lieutenant Jack Hunter stood at the forefront of the team, his brow furrowed in concentration. Despite their success on Nova 7, he knew this mission would be different. The Glacius facility was designed to be a fortress, harsh weather, difficult terrain, and alien defenses meant to break them. But Echo Squad had been born and bred to thrive in such conditions. "We've trained for this," Jack said, his voice calm but determined as he addressed his squad. "We've trained for every possible challenge Earth could throw at us. Adaptation is our weapon. These aliens might have their tricks, but they don't know us. We don't just survive, we learn, we evolve, we use our surroundings to our advantage." His words rang through the squad, a rallying cry in the face of overwhelming odds. Jack didn't need to say much more. His team knew exactly what was at stake. Echo Squad had faced impossible odds before, and they had come out on top. Now, they were about to face something even more dangerous, a war fought not just with weapons, but with the mind. Rodriguez, the heavy weapons specialist, checked his massive rifle, adjusting the straps on his armor. His fingers moved swiftly, no signs of hesitation or uncertainty. Okino, the squad's silent specialist, meticulously reviewed his stealth gear. He was the quiet presence in the background, but when it came to stealth, no one moved as silently as him. Singh, their tech expert, was already working on an advanced communications device that would allow them to coordinate with the rest of the team without being detected. Petrov, the medic, checked his medical kit, making sure everything was in place for the inevitable injuries they would face. And Kim, the linguist and field strategist, readied herself by reviewing alien communication patterns. Her mind, sharp as a blade, was already calculating possible outcomes and strategies. As they all moved to prepare, Jack's eyes settled on a small device in the corner of the room, a personal thermal scanner. He had never used it before, but with the Insectarii on the prowl, they might need every advantage. Jack wasn't relying on gadgets, though. He was relying on the humans in his squad, their ability to adapt in the most extreme situations. Meanwhile, back in the Alpha 9 command center, Keldar continued to monitor the squad's movements through his system's advanced sensors. He could see their heat signatures on the facility's surface, their movements clumsy and erratic as they triggered the sensors designed to lure them in. It was all going according to plan. But there was something about the humans that made Keldar uneasy. Something that went beyond their unrelenting survival instinct. As he watched them move, as he saw them adapt to the harsh environment, a dark thought nagged at the back of his mind. Were they playing him? Keldar dismissed the thought quickly, brushing it aside. The humans were nothing compared to the might of the Zaldhar and Vorrik. Once the Insectarii initiated the attack, they would have no choice but to fall. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that the humans might have something more dangerous than just weapons. They had the unpredictability of the hunted, the resilience of survivors. Something in his gut told him this wasn't going to be as easy as he had hoped. As the Insectarii moved into position, their eyes gleaming in the shadows, Echo Squad was already preparing to turn the tables on them. The trap was set, but in a world where survival meant everything, who would truly be the prey? The chilling winds of Glacius battered the Echo Squad as their drop pod slammed into the planet's frozen surface. The impact was brutal, a jarring shockwave that rattled their bodies despite the advanced armor they wore. As the pod's hatch slowly opened, a rush of frigid air seeped in, like 1,000 sharp needles pricking at their exposed skin. The team didn't flinch. Echo Squad was used to this. Their training had prepared them for this type of environment, for environments that were meant to kill. Jack Hunter, the leader, was the first to step out, his boots crunching on the hard, icy surface. His breath formed clouds in the air, instantly freezing as it met the biting cold. The temperature on Glacius was already unbearable, but it was Earth's gravity and weather that had sculpted them into something different, something far more resilient than the species they would face here. The other members of Echo Squad quickly followed, moving with practiced precision. Rodriguez, the squad's weapons specialist, scanned the horizon with a massive rifle slung across his back. Kim was already adjusting her translator device, monitoring alien signals while Okino, the squad stealth expert, silently checked his gear. Petrov, the medic, had his medical kit ready, just in case, while Singh, the tech expert, was already using a data pad to run diagnostics on their surroundings, looking for weaknesses in the facility's defenses. They didn't need to rush. The first part of their plan had been simple: make their presence known. They triggered security sensors as they moved, intentional clumsiness, a strategic distraction to lure their enemies into a false sense of superiority. They wanted the Insectarii to believe they were winning, to think that Echo Squad was disorganized, overwhelmed, and naive. Back in the Alpha 9 command center, Keldar stared intently at the heat signatures on his screen. His long, taloned claws tapped rhythmically on the console as the data from the facility's advanced surveillance system streamed before him. The human signatures had appeared where expected, just as he had planned. They had triggered the sensors, the perfect bait. His jaw clenched with a predatory smile as he watched the tiny dots on the holographic map approach. Predictable, Keldar muttered, his voice low and gravelly. The satisfaction in his voice was unmistakable. Send in the Insectarii. His order was swift, a calculated move. The Insectarii were their best assassins, stealthy, deadly, and with senses so fine-tuned that they could detect the faintest movement from miles away. The perfect predators to deal with what they thought were inexperienced, naive humans. As Keldar observed, the Insectarii moved into position, their elongated limbs and compound eyes scanning the frozen wasteland for the smallest of heat signatures. They advanced with eerie precision, melding into the shadowed recesses of the facility like shadows themselves. The Vorrik and Zaldhar warriors remained on standby, waiting for their moment to pounce. But then, something unexpected happened. The heat signatures of the humans vanished. The Insectarii had reached the coordinates they were given, but there were no humans in sight. The targets had disappeared into thin air. Keldar's yellow eyes narrowed in confusion. His fingers twitched, and the holographic map flickered as he zoomed in on the coordinates. Impossible. The heat signatures had been there just moments ago. Now, there was nothing but the cold, empty wasteland. The Insectarii began to search frantically, their multi-limbed bodies moving silently across the frozen ground. They combed every inch of the terrain, their venomous fangs clicking with agitation, their sharp exoskeletons glistening under the pale light of Glacius' distant sun. But despite their advanced sensory abilities, they couldn't find the humans. It was as if the Echo Squad had simply vanished. Keldar's chest tightened. He slammed his fist down on the console in frustration. Where are they? He hissed, the sound escaping his throat like a primal growl. His warriors, genetically engineered for perfection, were outsmarted by a handful of humans. They're not just fighting us. Keldar muttered, his voice trembling with something he hadn't felt in a long time. They're hunting us. His words hung in the air, heavy with realization. It wasn't just that the humans were surviving, they were turning the tables. They were using the facility's own design against them, slipping through shadows, moving faster than Keldar could track. It was as if they were born to blend with their environment, to survive and adapt in ways the Insectarii could never have anticipated. Far from the command center, deep within the bowels of the Alpha 9 facility, Echo Squad was already making their move. They had anticipated the Insectarii's advance and had disappeared into the labyrinthine corridors of the mining facility. They moved like shadows themselves, the light flickering across their faces as they slipped past surveillance cameras and alarms, utilizing the environment to mask their presence. The cold was brutal, but it didn't bother them. They were prepared. Jack Hunter had been in situations far worse than this, had walked through environments meant to break humans. Echo Squad had been molded to adapt to anything. They had learned to thrive in extreme environments, from the burning deserts of Earth to the freezing tundra of Glacius. Echo Squad, keep your heads on a swivel, Jack whispered into his COMM. They think they're hunting us. Let's make sure they know what it feels like to be the prey. The team responded with nothing more than a series of nods, their movements synchronized, the sound of footsteps muffled by their stealth gear. They had triggered the sensors deliberately, knowing it would draw the Insectarii out. Now, the tables had turned. The Insectarii, trained to be ruthless and efficient, were now on the defensive, confused and outmaneuvered. Kim, the linguist and strategist, quietly tapped at her wristband, syncing with the facility's internal systems. She quickly disabled another security checkpoint and hacked into the facility's communications, jamming the signals Keldar relied on to track their movements. "We've got them," Kim said, her voice steady but filled with an unspoken thrill. "Now, we turn their own weapons against them." Echo Squad had always known how to use their environment. Whether it was turning the cold to their advantage or blending into the shadows, they were adaptable in a way Keldar's mercenaries could never predict. They had survived Earth's harshest environments for centuries, and now, they would show the galaxy why humans were the most dangerous predators of all. Keldar's grip tightened on his console, his claws digging into the metal as his warriors failed to respond. His plan was unraveling. The humans were not just a threat, they were a force of nature. The air on Glacius was a biting cold that cut through the thickest of armor, and yet, Echo Squad pressed forward, their breath rising in white clouds as they trudged through the frozen corridors of the mining facility. The walls around them seemed to grow more dense and cold with every step they took, the low hum of machinery mixing with the occasional groan of the ice beneath their boots. The facility, once a hub for mining operations, now felt like a tomb, an abandoned crypt in the heart of an inhospitable world. The faint glow of emergency lighting illuminated their path, casting long, twisted shadows across the stark, metallic walls. As they advanced deeper into the facility, Kim was the first to stop, her eyes narrowing as she activated her scanner. The device beeped softly, the screen displaying anomalies deep beneath the ice. It was something they weren't expecting. Precursor technology, the kind that had been buried for millennia, lay hidden beneath the frozen surface. The moment Kim found the data, she turned to Jack, her voice a whisper of disbelief. "It's here, deeper than we thought. Precursor tech. But it's not supposed to be here. It's against the Galactic Confederation treaties to harvest it." Jack's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenching. This discovery wasn't just unexpected, it was a game changer. The Precursor technology was forbidden, but there it was, an ancient artifact that could change the balance of power across the galaxy. They had come for one mission, to gather evidence of the Consortium's illegal operations. But now, they had stumbled upon something far more dangerous, a piece of forbidden history. "We need to get this to the Confederation," Jack ordered, his voice unwavering. He motioned to the squad, his eyes scanning the area. "This changes everything. We can't leave this behind. The Precursor device needs to be taken back with us." As the squad prepared to move, Kim looked over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the dark, echoing hallway. She could feel the tension mounting. This wasn't going to be easy. The discovery of the Precursor tech would not go unnoticed, and it was only a matter of time before their enemies found out what they had uncovered. The next phase of the mission was about to get far more dangerous. "Vorrik incoming," Kim reported, her voice steady, but tinged with urgency. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder as the Vorrik mercenaries, known for their powerful strength and impenetrable armor, made their way down the corridor. These were the last enemies Echo Squad had been expecting, a fierce group of mercenaries hired by the Helix Consortium. The squad immediately fell into formation, knowing this battle would be unlike any other. The Vorrik were formidable, but Echo Squad had an edge: their ability to adapt. They weren't bound by the traditional tactics of alien mercenaries. Humans fought with a combination of ingenuity, brute force, and strategic thinking, something no alien race could replicate. Jack turned to his team, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "We set the trap. It's time to spring it. The squad moved swiftly, melting into the shadows of the facility, using the dark corners and alcoves to their advantage. The Vorrik were no strangers to the harsh conditions of Glacius, but they had underestimated the humans they were up against. The squad had prepared for this moment. They knew the layout of the facility, and they knew how to use it against their enemies. As the Vorrik mercenaries rounded a corner, their massive figures silhouetted by the emergency lighting, Rodriguez triggered the first of the traps. A massive steel door slammed down in front of the Vorrik, trapping them in a narrow corridor. The Vorrik charged forward, their massive hands swinging gravity hammers, smashing into the metal. But the trap had been set. A magnetic field activated, preventing the Vorrik from advancing. The facility's old machinery hummed to life, making the Vorrik's brute strength useless against the improvised trap. Kim smiled as the first wave of mercenaries was temporarily neutralized. "I love when a plan comes together." But the battle was far from over. The Vorrik were strong and relentless, and they had more tricks up their sleeves. They quickly adjusted their tactics, retreating further into the facility. However, Echo Squad had anticipated this. They had already prepared the next step. Okino, the stealth expert, silently moved into position. His movements were fluid and precise, like a shadow blending into the darkness. The Vorrik had no idea they were being stalked. Okino was positioned directly above them in the catwalks of the facility, his eyes trained on their movements. As the Vorrik moved into the next section of the facility, they unknowingly walked into the second trap. The walls around them suddenly shifted, and the floor beneath them dropped, sending them into a free fall. Singh, the tech expert, had hacked into the facility's gravity control systems and reversed the polarity, sending their enemies into disarray. The Vorrik struggled in the zero-gravity environment, their powerful bodies disoriented by the sudden change. It was the perfect opening for Echo Squad to strike. "We've got them," Jack said, his voice steady as the squad closed in. "Get the Precursor device, and let's move. The Vorrik are in our way, but we can't let this moment slip." As they reached the core of the facility, they found the Precursor device, a small but incredibly complex artifact buried beneath layers of ice and rock. It emitted a faint, almost imperceptible glow, its surface covered in intricate alien symbols that shifted like water beneath their eyes. The device hummed with a low, resonating frequency, sending vibrations through the cold air. Kim approached it cautiously, her fingers brushing over its surface. She felt something. Power. History. Danger. "We've got what we came for," Kim whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Now let's get out of here." But as the squad prepared to leave, the Vorrik regrouped, their anger and frustration fueling their next wave of attacks. They weren't done yet, and Echo Squad had only just begun to show them how dangerous a human could be. The hangar bay on Glacius was a dark, cavernous expanse, its metal walls coated in layers of frost. The bitter cold permeated the air, turning every breath into a puff of white vapor. The dim emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the floor, illuminating the machinery and cargo that had once been used for the mining operations. Now, it was a battleground, where Echo Squad stood their ground, surrounded by the imposing presence of the Vorrik mercenaries charging toward them. The Vorrik were massive hulking figures of muscle and armor, their eyes glowing with aggression. Each step they took shook the ground, their massive feet leaving deep imprints in the frozen floor. The gravity on Glacius was heavy, making each movement cumbersome, but their sheer size and strength made them formidable opponents. Their gravity hammers, massive weapons capable of crushing through reinforced steel, were raised high, ready to deliver a blow that could shatter bones with ease. But Echo Squad wasn't intimidated. They had trained for situations like this where adaptability and quick thinking could turn the tide of battle. The squad had set their traps expertly, using the environment against the Vorrik's brute strength. As the mercenaries charged, Rodriguez activated the first trap. Steel beams fell from above, causing the Vorrik to stumble and lose their footing. Okino, the squad's stealth expert, moved like a shadow, silently disabling the gravity controls in strategic sections of the hangar. The Vorrik were not prepared for the sudden shifts in the gravity field, making their movements even more awkward. With the Vorrik disoriented, the squad moved swiftly. Kim, unarmed and calm, stood in the center of the chaos. She was the anchor, the one who kept her team focused. As the Vorrik struggled to regain their balance, she shouted to the squad, "Move in. Get to Keldar now." Meanwhile, Keldar was in the corner of the hangar bay, the Precursor artifact clutched tightly in his hands. The metallic sphere, covered in glowing symbols, hummed with an ancient energy, its surface shifting and changing in response to his touch. Keldar's breath was ragged, his mind racing as he tried to activate the device. His fingers trembled as he pressed a sequence of symbols, but the device resisted his commands, flashing in erratic patterns. Desperation filled his voice as he muttered, "It's our only chance. This is all we have left." But before he could make another attempt, a voice echoed through the hangar bay. "Surrender now, Keldar, and no one else has to get hurt." Kim stood there, tall and unarmed, her posture calm, her eyes fixed on Keldar. Her composure was unsettling to him. She wasn't acting like the warriors he had fought before. No, this was different. She was thinking like a predator, not just a soldier. Keldar felt something stir in his chest, fear. It was something he had never experienced before in all his battles, but now, in the face of human adaptability, it crept into his mind like a shadow. He couldn't comprehend it. The humans, these fragile, small creatures, weren't fighting out of brute force. They were using something far more dangerous, their minds. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. The humans had outsmarted his mercenaries at every turn. Their tactics were unpredictable, calculated, and efficient. Keldar took a step back, his eyes narrowing. You think you can stop me?" But before he could respond, Echo Squad surrounded him, cutting off all possible escape routes. The hangar doors slid shut with a metallic hiss, trapping everyone inside. The consortium drones, sleek and deadly, poured in from every direction. Their laser sights locked onto Echo Squad, their weapons primed for destruction. A battle erupted in an instant. The Vorrik mercenaries lunged at Echo Squad with their gravity hammers, but their strikes were slow, hindered by the gravity fluctuations and the traps that had been set. Every move Echo Squad made was precise, and every decision was calculated. They used the Vorrik's own momentum against them, luring them into traps where their size and strength became their weakness. Rodriguez engaged in hand-to-hand combat with the first Vorrik to approach, his fists and feet moving with an astonishing speed that the Vorrik couldn't match. As he dodged a powerful blow, he used the Vorrik's own weight to bring them crashing to the ground. Kim, meanwhile, was still focused on Keldar, keeping him in check as the rest of the team neutralized the incoming threats. Keldar, however, had no intention of going down without a fight. His eyes flicked to the Precursor device in his hand. This was his last chance to escape with the artifact to salvage something from this disaster. His fingers fumbled again over the symbols, but the humans were closing in. "You're finished, Keldar," Kim said, her voice unwavering as she stepped forward. "Surrender now, and you might live. Keep resisting, and we'll make sure you don't." Keldar's claws twitched, but deep down, he knew he had lost. He had underestimated humans. He had thought their fragility was their weakness, but in reality, it was their strength. Their ability to adapt to any situation, to think their way out of any problem, had turned the tide of the battle. In the end, Keldar was forced to surrender. His Precursor device was confiscated, and Echo Squad had achieved their goal. As the Vorrik forces were neutralized and the drones were deactivated, the artifact was securely in Echo Squad's hands, ready to be delivered to the Galactic Confederation for further investigation. Keldar's final thought, as he knelt before Kim and the squad, was the realization that the humans were no longer just a species to be feared, they were a species that could change the galaxy. And in that moment, Keldar understood. He had been outplayed by a species he had once considered beneath him. And there you have it. The battle continues, and Echo Squad's fight against the galaxy's deadliest mercenaries is far from over. With Precursor technology in their hands, the stakes have never been higher, and the tension is palpable. Can humanity continue to outsmart and outlast the galaxy's most fearsome forces? Thank you for joining us in today's journey across the stars. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more thrilling sci-fi content. We're just getting started, and we've got plenty more epic battles, alien encounters, and human triumphs to come. Your thoughts and feedback are always welcome in the comments below. Your support helps us bring you more high-quality content every week. Stay tuned for the next chapter, and remember, the fight is far from over. Earth may be a death world, but humanity has something far more powerful: adaptability. See you in the next video. HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story out.